You win some and you lose some. And for UCLA and Deshaun Foster, they've been winning a whole lot in recruiting lately. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Where we get started today, what we're talking about, the first segment is a whole lot of recruiting for Deshaun Foster. The Bruins get another win in the class of 26. We're going to talk about a late ad, or maybe not late ad, but a late edition of me talking about the 2027 ad. And then who did UCLA lose out on in the recent days? Because as much as they've been winning, they did miss out on a recruit that there was highly coveted on the D-line. Let's start with the good news. UCLA, after a string of recruits since the end of the weekend, right? Micah Smith, we thought would be the end of 2-3 commits. No, UCLA has gotten half of their class of 26, which has almost vaulted them into the top 15, depending on which outlet you use in recruiting services. Over 3, whether you're using On3, Rivals, 24/7 Sports. The Bruins are in the top 20 in knocking on the door of a top 15. But because UCLA went out and they got another local commit, all right? This is what UCLA continues to do, getting the local talent, getting those guys that can develop after a little bit of some recruiting. It's Logan Hirou, probably saying the name incorrectly, but you bring in Logan, a Santa Margarita kid, 2026 DB, and you think about Coach Meets, the new DB coach, who has made his work known as a recruiter, UCLA in this 25 class in the transfer portal, and now starting to build in the 26 class, replenishing the talent, restocking the talent, and building the talent. All right, that is what he's got to do and what he's mostly been able to do. So you bring in Logan, and this is what he told Bruin Blitz. Saw a lot of good things when he went to his mid-April unofficial visit. So a lot of stuff that they play here at UCLA compared to what they do in high school. And that's an underrated aspect about what kids are looking for. What are they doing? What are their schemes? What do I know? How does my skill set translate to the next level at the Power 4, Power 5 level, to this scheme that UCLA is using, which makes coaching changes or coordinator changes such a fascinating thing. What was the one spot UCLA has not changed this last offseason? The defensive coordinator spot in Akaika Molloy. After a lot of changes over the last few years for various reasons, UCLA having stability at that spot, and look at all the defensive commits they've been able to get in recent times. So you bring in the 14th commit, 6 coming since near the end of the weekends in the first full weekend of June, and with a kid who had offers from Arizona, Utah, 15 total offers, UCLA is starting to beat out some of their Western-based rivals in recruiting, some of the Big 12 schools, some of which you would think, all right, they're getting that booster support. They've got longtime head coaches. Or you're thinking, all right, Kenny Dillingham's building something over there at Arizona State. And UCLA is like, yeah, no, by the way, we're building something here at UCLA. And that's what Deshaun Foster's been able to do. Hirou, who is a teammate of a fellow 2026 commit of Jonas Smith. And you're starting to see the relationships, right? You got the Pula brothers. You bring in high school teammates. You have 2 state of Florida commits in Micah Smith and Johnny Jones Jr. And you're starting to see UCLA pair out the local commits, the high school commits, the family connection in the Jaron and Ken Pula connection there. You mix in the state of Florida. Oh, wait, by the way, UCLA is starting to make a national recruiting name for themselves. And here the Bruins are getting another commit in Logan. And maybe this is a kid that can come in and commit. I'm not going to come out and say that right now in terms of he can be a key piece as a freshman. There's a lot of things that have to go in to be a successful player right away as a freshman and get some significant starting time and not burn a red shirt. But the building and the stockpiling of talent where you can just go to the Trinity League and grab some players from the 2 deep and you're going to have a pretty good roster. All right, go look at SEC schools. Go look at other schools. You just go and raid the Trinity League, you would get a lot of talent and local talent around the Southern section or whatever division, or even in some rare cases nowadays, the city section. You can find some talent all across the board. some raw prospects. Maybe not in the walk-on variety like a Carson Schlesinger is, but guys that might take a year or two to develop. And that's where the Bruins are slowly building. Go get those 4 stars that would sit elsewhere and start at UCLA. Go get those 3 stars that might go to Boise or go elsewhere and bring them to UCLA, get that education, maybe get them a year under the belt of a Deshaun Foster-led staff. And next thing you know, you're playing Big Ten ball as a sophomore or junior, your 3rd year of college football. That's big-time opportunity that nowhere else can present if you're trying to go to those levels as a 3-star. So we'll see how this all plays out. The recruiting heat continues for UCLA in the class of 26. Now, we'll mention the 2027 commit just a few days ago. You have Royalton Allen. He is a class of 27 commit. This is what Greg Biggins, the 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst, says. A talented two-way player could play corner, safety, or receiver at the college level. So think about this. You got a two-way player, a versatile athlete. Now, I'm not going to go say he's going to win a Heisman Trophy. We're not going to come out and go like that, all right? It takes a very, very special player to play both ways, play a lot of snaps, play DB, make plays as a receiver. We're not going to come out and say this is Travis Hunter. But I wonder how many guys might be inspired who are still in high school, who might be playing lower-level youth football, all right? And maybe they're thinking, hey, if I'm a DB or a receiver, why can't I go out and play both ways a little more? Now that Travis Hunter has gone to do that and led himself to a Heisman Trophy, started at FCS, Heisman Trophy in the Big 12, and then now was a top-tier pick in the latest NFL draft. All right? Those are all fascinating things. And with Allen now, this is what Greg Biggins says, plays a lot of safety currently in high school, and he has physicality, toughness needed, and could possibly play nickel and line up over an outside receiver, a lot of passion on the field, and a high motor, and could start at the Power 4 level. So that's somebody who UCLA just got as a two-way player in high school, as a 27 commit, who had recently gotten offers. All right, this is some of the latest offers that Royalton Allen got. Georgia in March, USC in March, Arkansas in March, in late April, Ole Miss, and in early June of 2025, he commits to UCLA. That's a growing trend that UCLA and Deshaun Foster has started to swing their way. When they're winning these battles for superb athletes locally on the western side of wherever they're located, that's a good thing. With NIL, with where the game's going, the Bruins are competing when they just weren't in recent years. And Deshaun Foster is now proven in 25, now turning into 26 especially, and moving forward very early on in the 27 recruiting class. Still a lot of time to flip and decommit and negotiations to go on there. But it's good to get an early recruiting win for the next cycle's recruiting class. And when the Bruins get guys like that, that is huge for UCLA to be like, hey, this guy is someone who can project, grow over his junior high school season. You can learn a lot more by the time he develops after his 3rd year in high school, project a little bit better as a senior, and we'll see how that develops. One guy UCLA would have loved to get, a 4-star defensive lineman, Khary Wilder, went to Ohio State. Had Notre Dame, UCLA, Washington, all on the radar. And then next thing you know, you had Khary Wilder, another Sarah kid, all right, locally in Gardena. Not Jay Sarah, I'm talking about San Juan Capistrano. We're talking Sarah in Gardena, who in Wilder just went on a late visit. Ohio State was one of his last offers of 31 total offers. And this is one of the second straight big-time defensive lineman recruits UCLA's lost to Ohio State. If I have Epi Satanale correct, you had him as a late flip. And then with Wilder going to Ohio State, this is someone from SoCal who finds his way to Columbus. So even though UCLA won the battle to get Micah Smith, won the O-line battle there, it's been Ohio State that's been developing so far. Last recruiting class are getting one of the top 4-star, potentially 5-star defensive linemen, and that's where UCLA lost out on. But you see the difference there. If it's a 2-3-1, 2-3 wins to 1 loss in a recruiting battle ratio, then half of, maybe 10% of the time to like 7 losses, or 1 or 2 recruits to 5 losses or commits elsewhere. That's where UCLA's flipped it in this recruiting class in 26. All right, Wilder goes somewhere else, okay? Maybe there's still time and maybe something can change. They're changing the ratio in favor of UCLA winning a lot of battles recruiting-wise. That wasn't the case in the winter, heading into the spring portal. But now you've taken an SEC playoff contender starting quarterback. Obviously a little different scenario, but Nico comes to UCLA. You take another SEC quarterback, bring him to UCLA. You're bringing talent from all these other schools, and that's where the Bruins have made their mark so far in this recruiting season. But what's left an ugly mark right now is the UCLA softball transfers. I've counted 6 so far, according to the D1 softball transfer portal tracker, and 2 significant entries. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, fans losing their minds. It's the type of atmosphere that you want to experience live, and you must experience live. It's one of the favorite things I love to do. If I'm sitting there on a Wednesday at 1:10 or Thursday at 1:10, I'm usually looking on Game Time, and I'm sitting there like, what's the best deal I can get on a ticket that can get the best and best opportunity? All right. If I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm not at a game right now. What am I doing? That's how I feel. And if you want to see some of the best games, whether it's playoff intensity or those wacky day playoff games, you need to go to Game Time because there's killer last minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees. Game Time is a total game changer. And there's been times when I was in New York, think about the Knicks. They were one of the hottest tickets through the winter heading into the deep playoff run they just made. And I wanted to go see the game in Madison Square Garden. At the time, the NBA Cup. I got a great deal on some good seats in the Garden. First time I ever got to see it, see where I was sitting, and the best prices against the best team the Knicks were playing when I was in town. All because of a good zone deal with Game Time. And you know the prices. And there's the Game Time guarantee, so you know you're getting the best deal. If you find a better price in the same row and section, that'll credit me with 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, going to wrap things up talking about UCLA softball. A surprising exit from a couple of standouts on this UCLA roster in 2025. A team that arguably could have snuck in and made it to the championship series. You saw Texas Tech do it with Nigeri Kennedy leading the Red Raiders just on the verge of a near national championship after having done nothing in the Big 12 prior to that. Texas and Oklahoma leave, and then it's Texas Tech that comes out with a Stanford transfer and turns themselves into a premier team all the way to the championship series, their first ever. All right. And the Bruins were a steal at home, a couple of clean softball plays away from making it to the championship series and taking on Texas. All right. A heartbreak against Tennessee away. So let's talk about what is Kelly Inouye-Perez losing from her roster this upcoming year. According to the D1 softball tracker, this is who has entered the portal in recent days. You have Ariane Munoz, you've got Maggie Daniel, Lisa Losteen, Kate Blunt, and you're like, okay, who exactly are those players? But there's still players who are on the roster leaving from UCLA. And then the two big ones, Kaitlyn Terry and Addisen Fisher, two of which are pitchers with multiple years of eligibility. Terry just finished her sophomore year, was a conference freshman of the year. You have Addisen Fisher, who in her freshman year was utilized quite a bit, not so much late in the postseason. The Bruins relied a lot on Taylor Tinsley, a lot more on Kaitlyn Terry, and Terry turned more into a two-way player, an outfielder when she wasn't pitching. Could swing the bat a little bit, including a clutch triple to keep the Bruins season alive when the Bruins were playing South Carolina in the Supers. And now you're losing, I did the math, between Terry and Addisen Fisher, 61% of your innings pitched, all right, from two of your three workhorses in the circle. Addisen Fisher, these were her numbers, an ERA just over 2.5, went 16-2, 32 appearances, 16 starts, 6 CGs, had a save, 113 2/3 innings pitched, and had 100 strikeouts, while a .241 batting average against. Kaitlyn Terry, who was utilized the most out of all these UCLA pitchers from an inning standpoint, 33 appearances, 22 saves, 20-5 she was. Kaitlyn Terry, 20-5, with a pair of saves, had 172 strikeouts to lead UCLA. All right, so you're losing a lot of punch-out power from the circle. 172 strikeouts, 34 walks. That's 13 more Ks than Taylor Tinsley, with just only 10 more walks to go and 11 more innings pitched. All right, a .222 batting average against, And so far, she was pretty solid when swinging the bat, too. These are Kaitlyn Terry's batting statistics. Terry this season hit .257, hit a pair of home runs, 10 extra bases, 24 RBIs, as someone who contributed in multiple ways and had an on-base percentage of .361 out of usually the 8 or 9 slot in the batting order. So I just wonder, is this one of those situations where you saw Kennedy get a massive NIL deal to go to Texas Tech? $1 million. Not just once, but twice to secure her, I believe, senior year at Texas Tech. And now I know that the revenue sharing will be very interesting, but is that playing a role? Do they not like playing at UCLA? I wonder what the story is, and I quite frankly, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but what, 5 to 6 players, according to the D1 softball tracker, 2 of which are premier players, one of which, in Kaitlyn Terry, leaned on more than anybody in the playoffs, in the NCAA tournament, in multiple ways to allow the Bruins to move forward through the regionals, through the supers, get to the Women's College World Series. And now they're just gone. Now remember, it's the transfer portal. You can always return. You can always take your name out, and there could be a conversation, whether it was a bad blood situation, maybe a disagreement over playing time, maybe it's a situation where it's financial, or quite simply they were told to get out of town. There's many different ways that these players in any sport are told to leave. All right. There's many different opportunities, and I'm quite frankly not sure what it could be. But when you see quite a few players leave, you see one of your top recruits from a year before, one of your most utilized pitching options and weapons the last 2 seasons. All right. This isn't like, okay, it's a super senior that's about to go leave. But we did see how much the impact of just Nyjah Kennedy going to Texas Tech transformed that team. Now they have a coach who is ready to take Texas Tech to the next level with a lot of transfers from Louisiana. But still, you bring in someone as premier as that, you bring in someone who could be as lights out with Terry or even Addison Fisher, and I just wonder what's going on. Maybe UCLA is cooking up something in the portal. I have just not seen that just yet, but it's a little concerning this early. I know you guys brought it up in then some of the comment section. You're like, what's going on? It's interesting. Quite a few players from a winning team. All right. This is a team that's made it to back-to-back Women's College World Series. This isn't like, oh, there's a couple of holdovers from that team that lost in the regional. No. That sour taste is mostly out of the mouths of the freshmen and the sophomores, right? You're sitting there like, okay, those players, they weren't there for the most part on that team. And you're losing Jessica Clemens, who was your table setter at the top of the order as a grad transfer from Cal Poly. She was a 1-year player. So you're losing some senior talent. You're losing your talent in the circle, and this is either addition by subtraction. UCLA is expecting something in the portal. They're going to pony up, and they're going to buy or just offer something. I know it's going to be unique. Now there's supposed to be more of a watchdog-like mentality with NIL versus what it had been. Or does UCLA trust the freshmen coming in? This is just all a fascinating thing that maybe it gets worked out, and this will be all a non-story by the time we get to the fall, or just a week, or a couple of months. Yet right now, what's going on at UCLA with the softball team and how they're losing at least 5 or more with 2 premier players in the portal, you're like, wait a minute. The portal giveth and the portal taketh away. And right now, it's taking away. We'll see how the UCLA Bruins respond. It was a great year, getting themselves to host a regional, play on the road in the supers, get back to the Women's College World Series. And until next time, we'll see how it plays out. But that's why you want to be at Locked On UCLA. Like, comment, subscribe, download. We'll talk more basketball, more football. Lots of recruits deciding to go to UCLA. A lot of decisions coming up. You're going to want to be here. And upcoming, we'll have an episode with a crossover of Locked On Spartans. What's it going to look like for UCLA and Michigan State in the future for their upcoming matchup later this year, right? What will those expectations be for both programs, both under second-year head coaches? That's coming up in a future episode, and a lot more here on Locked On UCLA. So hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.